I'm getting my soil ready and my containers ready to plant some potatoes for my spring vegetable garden. And you can probably see that I'm using something that's a little bit different maybe than you've used before or than you've seen before, because I'm using what's called a grow bag, or this particular brand is called a Smart Pot. So in my yard, I don't have a great spot for a vegetable garden, and I just want to grow a few vegetables because it's for me. So I'm doing some things in containers on my patio area. It's the only place I really have sun. And I'm using this grow bag this year because it's a different kind of pot. I will be doing some other things, especially like my herbs and some lettuce and spinach and kale, radishes in regular containers like I always do. But I'm going to do the potatoes, and then later this spring I'll do tomatoes and peppers in these containers. Now the benefit of them is that they work a little bit more like regular soil. So when water contacts the side of this, it can actually flow through this permeable membrane. It's just like a cloth or like a fabric. And so water can move through from the entire container, and it can move through at the bottom just like it would with any other kind of container, because you always have containers with holes in the bottom. So what this means is that it drains a little bit differently in a couple of ways. So we have our regular, this is just my old plastic pots that I do my vegetables in. When water hits the side of this, it goes down. So, and then it drains out the bottom, hopefully, because we've got good drainage in there. But with this container, because the water can move out, it's okay to use a little bit heavier of a soil mix. And also, when roots of the plants hit the side of that container, instead of being struck with the hard plastic or pottery or wood or whatever other kinds of materials you're using for pots, and circling around, you know how you pull a plant out sometimes and it's really pot bound? That won't happen in these grow pots, because when the roots of the plant hit that outer wall, they'll dry out, and we call that air root pruning. So just a couple of different things about different ways that they grow. So these are really well suited to plants that have larger root systems. Now, what I want to plant in here this year are potatoes. And I know that sometimes we think about planting potatoes on St. Patrick's Day. So there's a, I don't know, just like a long-standing tradition of St. Patrick's Day is the day that you want to get out and plant your potatoes. And the truth is that a lot of times the soil is still a little too chilly for the potatoes to grow well. And sometimes they end up rotting a little bit, or they're just not happy. And so they'll just sit there and kind of wait for that soil to warm up. And so I waited a little bit longer, and it's really okay to wait. About the latest that you can plant potatoes is the end of April. You could maybe get by early May, but the latest you want to do it is really early April, so that you get your crop before the soil gets too warm or before the daytime temperatures get too warm for the plants. Now you can do a second crop if you plant in August, and you want to do that when it's going to cool off and be a little bit cooler for the plants. So I have seed potatoes that have already sprouted, and as you can see, if they hadn't sprouted, the thing that I would be looking for on the potatoes is the eyes. And so like this is one that's just getting ready to sprout. There's an eye. This one really hasn't sprouted yet. That's an eye. And if you can cut them so that there's just one eye per chunk of potato, then that's really getting the most for your money. But a lot of times it's difficult because you have 2 or 3 or more eyes that are close together. So this potato I'm going to show you because we have several sprouts. This one will be easy to cut up, but I'm just going to cut these. Now the deal is that I can't actually plant my potatoes today because I'm just now cutting them. So if I put this in the ground like this, then I've got an open fleshy wound, and there are bacteria that live in the soil and fungi that live in the soil that would love to just colonize inside that potato. And so what I am going to do is let this sit out for 2 or 3 days until this forms a hard, like dried out edge over where I've just cut the potato. So see, I've got this nice little chunk of potato with just one little sprout on it. And I'm going to set this back aside to hold for 2 or 3 days. And then once that's sealed over, that's called suberizing. That's your little garden trivia for the day, suberized. Once that's ready to go, then I'm going to stick it in the ground and just cover it with soil. And actually in this pot, at the depth that I have it at right now, I could just barely stick it in and then layer some more soil in on top of it, so I don't have to really dig holes. And I'm going to plant them about 6 to 8 inches apart in this pot. So just a few potatoes, not very many, But the other cool thing about doing potatoes in a grow pot is that when they're ready to dig, I don't have to dig them. I can just turn the pot over, just dump it out, and then I'll have my potatoes to sort out. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut this one up too, or cut this other chunk. Now see, there are a couple here together close, so I'm just gonna cut between them. Try not to damage the sprouts that are there. Make a cut there. And you really don't need a big chunk of potato with the sprout. So you can see that this is just a smaller chunk. That's gonna be just fine. And there we go. So there are potatoes. Now, I know the other question that you're wondering about is about the soil in this pot. So you saw me dumping my soil from my old terracotta containers that I had vegetables growing in last year. And normally I always tell you to use good potting soil, new potting soil in any container that you're doing. If you were planting, or when I get ready to plant this with vegetables, when I'm filling my plastic pots or my ceramic pots, I am definitely going to use new potting mix, potting media, and the stuff breaks down, it gets heavy over time, it drains a certain way. I'm never going to go out and dig soil out of my garden to put into a container because it doesn't move the same way. That soil is really formulated to be in a container and to drain the way that we want it. Now, it has broken down. This is obviously, like I said, stuff I used last year. It's broken down a little bit. It's not as light and fluffy as what I want for those containers. But for this pot, because of the way that the water moves through here, it's going to be okay. So I could mix this with some garden soil. I could mix it with some fresh potting mix if I wanted to drain a little bit better. But it is okay to use a little bit heavier of a mix or to reuse some soil in these grow bags. So that's another nice little benefit of them. And get my potatoes cut up and I'll be ready to go on these.